She just said it's too complicated. So are we ready? Okey doke. Okay. It's 6:35 p.m. The November 1st meeting of the Mountain View Westman School District Board of Trustees is called to order. Will those who can stand, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? You don't have to stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks, everyone. May I have roll call, please?
Ellen Miller. Tamara Wilson.
Greg Coladonato.
And Laura Blakely is here in
Hey,
person.
how about me?
I was just going to say, and on the phone, we have Jose, are you there?
Jose Gutierrez Sr.
Can you say it again, please?
Jose, say it again.
Oh, Jose Gutierrez Jr.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, and on the phone?
Nay.
Seriously?
There's always one in the back.
No.
Just for fun.
Okay, so you approve the agenda. Okay, on a motion made by, now I got distracted, Trustee Wheeler and seconded by Trustee Coladonato, excuse me. The agenda was unanimously approved. And now's the time for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. Any members of the public wishing to comment on closed session agenda items? Okay, seeing none, it's 6:37. The meeting is adjourned to closed session.
County elected here.
Here though. And to take them home and they won't even make it home if I leave them here.
Yeah, right. Farther away from
I have others.
I hear you. And that way with the Halloween candy.
Yes.
I'm sure you have it. We had time through this. I have not. My Mac is so old, it probably wouldn't work.
Oh, they
I don't
wouldn't
know
let- they
what,
wouldn't let
no,
you?
the one I own, this one I don't have a thing. It says right here that.
I gotta tell you, this food's delicious.
Is it? They do a crazy good job.
It's not that tri-tip. The tri-tip I couldn't stop eating. I mean, I haven't stopped eating this either. So, but tri-tip was so good I couldn't stop eating.
Okay, we're ready? Is Jose on the line?
Yes, reached.
Weird.
Okay, it's 7:11 PM. The meeting of the Mountain View Wisman Board of Trustees is adjourning from closed session. And I would like to report regarding item A1, anticipated litigation, a settlement agreement with regard to student 6000314 and student 600, I put too many zeros in that first one. There's 3 in each. 6006316 was approved. The agreement resolves claims against the district and requires payment of approximately $36,250. Okay. And no other action was taken in closed session. Okay, now the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. The following items will be handled with one action. However, any item may be removed from consideration by individual board members or the superintendent. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Trustee Gutierrez?
Aye.
Okay, on a motion made by Trustee Wheeler and seconded by Trustee Coladinato, the consent agenda was approved unanimously. Okay, the next item on the agenda is communications. Do we have any members of employee organizations here this evening that would like to present to the board? District committees, I know Trustee Wheeler, you said you had a comment.
Yeah, so I went to the SELPA 1 CAC meeting this morning, and there was a conversation about substitute teachers, and two questions came up that people would appreciate an answer to at some point in time, not necessarily tonight. So one of the questions was, and this is all regarding substitute teachers. One of the questions was, does Mountain View Wisman School District do professional development for substitute teachers? The second question was, does Mountain View Wisman School District do professional development for substitute teachers that includes teaching them or, some knowledge, giving them some knowledge base about special ed instruction? And then I had a question related to both of those questions, which is if we have professional development for substitute teachers, is it required for them to take those courses?
So yes, we do have professional development for substitute teachers. We start the year off with professional development, then once a month, we bring all of them in to do additional training, which goes into your second question. Yes, we do provide them with training on how do you deal with students in an inclusive environment? How do you deal with special ed? And then the last one, is it required? It is not required, but we actually do have a pretty good attendance rate of the 40 substitutes that we have in the district.
Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other members of district committees here this evening wishing to make a report? Okay, Dr. Rudolph, superintendent's comments.
No updates this week.
No updates, okay. Thank you. So then we're moving along to community comments. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. Speakers are requested to complete a speaker card and state their name for the record. If there are additional comments after 10 minutes have elapsed, this item may be continued after all the action and discussion items are completed. I don't believe I have any cards for non-agendized items. Were there any members of the community wishing to speak on something that is not on the agenda? Okay, thank you. So we're moving to review and discussion, requests for input, and the first item is the exemption process for the 1920 enrollment.
All right, so you're going to have me up here for the beginning, middle, and end. So just bear with me. The first one that we have is talking about the boundary change process and unveiling our exemption process that we're going to be using. And so this is in alignment with the district goals. Last year, one of the board's goals was to initiate planning to successful opening of Jose Antonio Vargas Elementary School in the 2019-2020 school year. And then also for how staff will communicate the impact of AR 5115, which was decided at the end of last year. And it was set by the Enrollments Priority Task Force. And so we're taking a multi-pronged approach in terms of reaching out to families. We have started, in the coming weeks, we'll be doing face-to-face meetings where each school and the PTAs are setting up welcome events. We have sent out emails. We are doing newsletters. There's PTA presidents have also volunteered to do events. And then we've also created a help desk in the case that there are answers. And then we are sending letters through snail mail to make sure that we get to all the families. And so the first set of letters went out on October 17th. And then a second set of letters actually are going out today to families who are transitioning, as well as individuals who are not. And so the part of this also is about empowering staff. We understand that teachers and secretaries, as well as principals, are going to be asked more questions than we are. And so we have distributed talking points to staff, both the principals that they have already shared with teachers. And then we've also held a meeting with secretaries and sent them talking points also. And then our SCEPs and our at-risk coordinators have also been empowered to be able to answer questions. And then there is a form that we use in the event that they can't answer the question so that they send it back to the help desk. And then starting last week, we started sort of a roadshow of going around and talking about the staffing implications of opening Vargas. And then with that, if in the event that they don't have questions during that meeting, we do have sort of a parking lot where they can ask particular questions and send those off, and then we'll send those back. So we received 2 questions from Bub last week. We didn't go to any schools this week. We have a couple more set up. The sites that we're going to first are the sites that are impacted the most, meaning that they're going to actually have some type of reduction in force or lose staff. And really, it's not a reduction in force. It's just a shifting of individuals. So Huff and Bub are the 2 sites that are losing the most students. So those are the 2 sites that we're going to first, and then we'll make our way through the list throughout the rest of the year. And I would like to say that we've already communicated. We really want this to be a volunteer process for staff, and we do, and communication both through our employee relations board as well as with our teacher union president have already understood that there's a lot of excitement about teachers who want to move over to Vargas and be part of a new school. And so this is a really exciting event for us. As I said before, the help desk has been set up in the event that there are questions that we can't answer that go beyond the FAQs, and that those are being answered by Mrs. Geisels as well as Mrs. Avina in the enrollment process or in the enrollment center. And then if there's still a concern, we also have the opportunity for an exemption process, and I'm going to go over that right now. So this is what the exemption request form looks like. I will say that it is up to the parent to provide as much information as they feel is needed in order to explain why their child should be exempt from the transition to the process. And this was explained last year. And in order to make this happen, we have already received one community volunteer who's going to participate on the three-person panel. We are asking the board at some point to appoint a member from the board to sit on the panel. And then Mrs. Geisel, who oversees enrollment, will also sit on the three-person panel. And of course, it takes 2 votes in order to move it forward. In the event that a parent is unsatisfied with the exemption process, they always have the right to appeal to the board at any time for you to hear their particular case. And then our goal is after the panel reviews the exemption form and goes through all the documentation and makes a decision, that we will notify the parents within a week of those meetings. Because it is 2 members, one is from the board and one is from the community and one is a staff member. We do not expect this to be an everyday meeting. We expect this to be either a monthly or a bi-weekly meeting. Or bi-monthly, sorry, not bi-weekly. So our next steps is we will continue to communicate all the information both through email and through staff. We are starting on welcome events at all of our sites so that parents are clear. And we will be doing more welcome events in the spring. And once the staff is set for Vargas, we hope to do sort of a larger welcome event for Vargas Elementary with the new staff. And then the last step of this, which I mentioned earlier, is that we are asking that you appoint someone between now and January when the enrollment process starts to sit on the board or to sit on this exemption review committee. That's it.
Thank you. Trustees, any clarifying questions?
Yeah, I have one. So we know that, we went through a process where we agreed that incoming 5th grade students could stay at their current school and their siblings could stay at that school for that 1 year.
Correct.
So if I'm assuming that those parents with incoming 5th grade students and a sibling have received a letter explaining that.
Mhm.
So my question about the application for the exemption, if that sibling would like to apply for an exemption after that 1 year, when should they apply? Should they apply this year or should they wait until at the end of next year?
So it was never our intent to have this process continue past this year. If the board wants us to continue the exemption process after this year, then I would say that we'll seek direction on that one. But then the parent would need to apply the next year.
Okay.
They wouldn't apply this year. But we have been very clear with individuals that while you are exempt this year, the expectation is that all of those exemptions disappear. And that was also part of the Enrollment Priorities Task Force recommendation. All the exemptions disappear the year after and people attend their neighborhood schools.
So I have a follow-up question to that. Does
Sure.
that mean we'll be tracking those siblings this year and sending out similar letters like the one I received for my son for this coming school year where he'll be transitioning?
Yes.
So we'll know who they are and they'll be getting the similar style
Yes,
letter next year.
we keep track of all of the students that we move, that we have either moved or that will be exempt. So we will have a file to track them and we will communicate with them the same way we're doing right now,
Okay.
which is that the expectation is that you're going to be transitioning to the school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Were there any members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Would you please, are you commenting on this item? Oh, okay, you can go ahead and make your comment and then bring your card up afterwards, but say your name when you get to the podium. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, misunderstood. Sorry about that. Okay, well, any additional comments or questions, trustees?
I'll just comment. I got both letters today, and it was really neat to see that for the new school that you're asking for not just parents to weigh in on the both the mascot and the colors, but you explicitly stated that you would like the parents to have the children sit down with them and walk through the thought exchange process
Correct.
to select both the colors and the mascot. I thought
Yeah.
that was
Well,
just very well done. It was a nice touch.
yeah, we want the kids to be the owners of the mascot and the
Yeah.
colors versus parents. We've heard some very interesting names that were sort of tossed out, but I think those are all adult names with these sort of these tones, and I
Yeah.
think kids are probably going to choose something simple like a eagle or a gator or I don't think snakes ever make it, but some type of animal that will
Right.
be there. So, but we want them to be the owners of it, and
true.
so what we are hoping, like you said, is that you will sit down with Lucas and that
Yeah.
the two of you will go through and ask him sort of what are colors would you like to see, and then what mascots, and then as that process evolves, he'll be able to vote on which one he likes most, and then we'll bring that back to the board and share that.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to thank you. I know there is a lot of consternation in the community, and change is always scary. And I know that we've received a lot of emails from various community members whose kids may possibly be moving, and I appreciate the attention that you've given to responding to each of those emails. So thank you for that. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the unduplicated pupil population.
All right. So I want to talk
Hey,
about.
Dr. Rudolph.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Jose.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Jose.
Okay, so I have one question, and that's in regards to the application process and the parent appeal. Will that go directly to the board with them making a personal appeal, or how would that system work?
On the last item.
Talking about
Oh.
the exemption
Yeah.
item?
The exemption process will go to the exemption review team, and then after that, if a parent wants to appeal further, then they have a right to appeal to the board.
Right, but would they come directly to the board with that, or would we present that in a closed session, or how would that work?
It's an open session item, so they would bring it to the board. You can develop a committee if you want, so that it can be an item that doesn't have to come to the board. If you trust 2 or 3 individuals and make it an ad hoc committee that has a limited time frame, that is well within your rights.
Okay, great, thanks.
Did that answer the question, Jose?
He said yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Thank you. Okay, now for unduplicated pupil population.
All right, I'm back up here again.
Let's do the count.
So let's talk about the unduplicated. So unduplicated accounts for funding purposes is how we count our English learners, students who meet our eligibility for free and reduced lunch meals, as well as our foster youth. The reason why we call it unduplicated is because it means that while these individuals may count under multiple categories, we can only count them once. And so, you could have an English language learner who's also a foster youth and who is free and reduced lunch, but for the purpose of an unduplicated count, it's just a one-time count. Why this is important is because there is a specific funding stream that we use to support these students, and it's a targeted student support funds that we give to every single site. This is in addition to the student, the official count or the official funds that we give for your general student population. So essentially we say, if you have 1,000 kids, we'll give you $200,000. And then if 50 of those kids are, unduplicated, then we will give you an additional $50,000. It's a gross exaggeration of the amount of funds that we give, but it's just to highlight we do send to every single site targeted assistance for those students. And it's our expectation, and as you see in our site plans, that those funds are used specifically for those kids. And so we calculate those funds at the 1st of October, and that's what sets the amount that we do. One thing that's important to understand is that when we set our site budgets, we actually start off with 75% of what we estimate the amount of what we estimate their population is. And that assures that if a school experiences some type of dip in funding or in enrollment, that we have a large enough cushion to absorb it. So essentially in October, almost every single site gets free money afterwards that they can add to their site plans. And if you looked at the site plans earlier or next week, you'll see that they have it outlined which items they would like to add in the event that when they get their 100% funding. In addition to this, we also have federal funds that are tied, not to the unduplicated account, but they are tied to our free and reduced lunch numbers. And so in our district, we set the bar at 60% for full school federal funds. And I'll talk about why that's important in a little bit. We do have the flexibility to move it up or down. At some point, though, you move from a comprehensive school program to targeted assistant programs once you continue to drop the funds down. And that's going to be important for us to consider as we move forward and we start talking about Title I funds. And then, of course, Title III funds are targeted specifically for English language acquisition. There are additional funds from federal monies, but for the purposes of unduplicated account, these are the biggest two expenditures that we have. And so why is this important? As you can see, typically we have an interesting trend in Mountain View. At the beginning of the year is actually when we are at our lowest numbers. And then by April, for various reasons, and this question came up in the board questions this week, for various reasons, we actually see a spike, and then it sort of normalizes again. So last year, our unduplicated account in October was 40.19. It then eventually went up to 41.6. And then in October, you see that it drops again. But we use the April numbers as our projected numbers. And that's why this conversation is going to be important. And as you can see, we've lost 99 students in our unduplicated counts. And on top of that, even though you see our free and reduced lunch numbers have dropped only by 1.43%, what's interesting is that it climbs throughout the school year and then it drops back down. And there's various reasons why this occurs. Our EL students tends to remain the same, but again, we're starting to see a transition in that. And this has been a steady decline in our district for quite some time. It's existed. We've talked about this for multiple years. In terms of students, again, although we are only off by one and we are down from October 2016, you can see that we increased from October to April. And so at our site trends, what you can see is the three sites that were impacted by this the most was Landos, Castro, Therakoff, and Crittenden. Landos experienced the largest drop of 7% in terms of their unduplicated count. And that actually, while we saw drops in all of our sites, Landos was the only one that experienced a negative that went below what the 75% threshold was. So again, we fund schools at 75% of what we believe their projected enrollment is going to be, with the assumption that once we finalize the numbers, we'll give them 100%. Their numbers dropped so low that they actually went below. So they would have lost targeted student support funds. we decided that 75% was the threshold by which we're going to hold, and we didn't want Landos to reduce any of their programs that they've already budgeted for. And so we made Landos whole in terms of their amount. So they didn't lose any of their targeted student support funds. And primarily because, and I'll go into this in a second, we think there's some other factors that are at play in terms of why the unduplicated count is disappearing or is dropping. And so here you can see the free and reduced lunch totals as well as the EL. And I'm going to use this to talk about Title I funds. So currently in our Khan app, we have set 60%. And last year, Therakoff qualified for Title I funds. As of this year, Therakoff, if we were to do it today, Therakoff would not qualify for Title I funds. And we expect that trend to continue, right? So we could move the free and reduced, the Title I fund mark down to 50%. Therakoff would probably qualify next year. But what would happen is that what we'll see is that they'll probably be in the 40% by the time we have our official numbers. And then we could play this game again where we would put Title I funds towards towards Therakoff, but we would have to continue to lower the mark. And this trend is pretty consistent across all of our schools with the exception of Castro, which it had a 4% drop, but it went from 88 to 84. So it still remains well above the threshold. So that's important as we move into our budgeting process and we start talking about how do we allocate extra resources and how do we allocate extra funds to our two sites, our two most challenging sites, Therakoff and Castro. We will need to have, the board will need to have a conversation about its expectations for Title I. Do you want to continue with the program knowing that only one school is going to count? Do you want to continue to chase your tail? And for lack of a better terminology, with the free and reduced lunch numbers, or do you want to find another way to supplement the funds? And so why are we seeing this drop? One of the reasons that we're expecting, the federal poverty line is set at $24,000 for a family of four. In Mountain View and in California, for the most part, the minimum wage is $15. If you work 30 to 40 hours a week at $15, you're going to exceed the $24,000 for a family of four. So we think that plays a part of it. We have to admit that the gentrification of Mountain View is playing an impact. There's a house right around the corner from the district office, which is 800 square feet, and it's going for $1.7 million. And then what we've also noticed is that we also have a number of our undocumented families that, because of the current political climate, are really afraid of applying for free and reduced lunch funds. We have met with our SCEFs as well as our at-risk coordinators, and we've looked at the numbers and asked them to go back out and to explain to parents that this information would not be shared with the federal government, that we need to provide your child with food and additional assistance. So we have recaptured some of those numbers since we started this effort, but it's important to note that that fear is also out there. And then I think the other piece of this is that we are experiencing a reduction in our English language learners. And we're seeing a transition in the type of students that we have. Typically, we view our English language learners as Latino, and we're starting to see a transition amongst that group, which obviously has an impact. And so when the other effect of this is that when the unduplicated pupil count drops, so does district funding. So we're seeing a $200,000 shortfall. And what's are part of our immediate concerns is that our Beyond the Bell program actually, I believe it's at two sites. Is it two? At two sites, no longer qualifies for evening meals. We have made the decision that we will find the funding to continue the meals at those sites. So we're going to scrub the budget to see if we can find it. So that's not going to be a concern. But what will happen within the next 2 years, because we're in a 3-year grant, is that we are going to have a conversation about Beyond the Bell and its program, because we will have sites that are no longer eligible under the state's grant program to qualify for Beyond the Bell. And so we will need to look at other after-school offerings as we start that transition. And that's just a part of the reality. And it could be that it becomes concentrated at certain schools, but we know, again, that there are a couple sites that are impacted. The other thing is that even though our site plans are aligned, we will continue to monitor its impact on the financial budget. Like I said, one of the commitments we made is that the 75% for the targeted student support funds was the threshold by which we would hold. So we kept Landos harmless on that one. Every other school did not receive any drop in fund. Well, they received a drop in funding from the 100%, but that drop in funding, when you look at the 75, when you look at the true 100%, they're still receiving some additional funds because of the numbers. And then, you know, we have a pretty robust child nutrition program, but part of that child nutrition program is predicated on our free and reduced lunch numbers. And unfortunately, we can't go to a system-wide program where we can feed every single student. And so what we will be seeing over the next couple of years is that the cost to feed students will continue to increase because we won't be getting the same percentage of federal reimbursement that we were getting. And that's a direct correlation to individuals filling out the free and reduced lunch application. Long-term concerns, obviously, as we look at unduplicated with a charter school that will possibly open with a focus on socioeconomically disadvantaged students or unduplicated students, it is possible that funding will go to them in the same vein. McKinney-Vento liaison, as well as the state and federal programs department, are actually funded out of Title I. And so we will need to find additional funds to support those programs. Our homeless population is not dwindling, but because it's not being named or it's not being identified, it is important to keep this position within the district so we continue to provide resources. The sustainability of our preschool program, as well as Beyond the program, if programs drop below the 50% floor, is a question that we're going to have. And so we will need to figure out creative solutions to continue the free preschool program, as well as a free after school program, which is our Beyond the Bell. The good thing is that for the Beyond the Bell grant, we have 2 additional years. So we have a little lead time that we can put into this. And then, of course, as I said already, we've already committed to making sure that the preschool, as well as Beyond the Bell, will continue their meal program. We do not want any family to go hungry. And so we are going to supplement that by finding some funds within the district and making cuts other places. But that is going to be a future consideration that we'll have to take into play, that the costs are going to continue to go up because of the reimbursement rates. And so what's next? We will continue to study the data. We are currently using our SCEPs and our at-risk coordinators to reach out to our families to make sure that they understand that despite the current political climate, that it is okay for you to fill out this information and that this information will not be shared with anyone else. I do have a concern with the census coming up that we'll continue to see drops in this. And so we'll have to make some more concerted efforts. All of our principals are also aware of this. And so we are planning on using the excess shoreline funds to supplement this. This year, we as Dr. Clark will report in our first interim, we got a healthy bump from the share shoreline JPA. And so we are able to take some of those funds out and use that for these purposes. If that continues, great, or if the contribution goes up, great, but at some point we need a long-term solution because these are just Band-Aids to the problem.
Thank you. Trustees, clarifying questions before I open up to community comments? We have a couple.
Yeah. Regarding your chart showing the percentages at each of the schools.
Mhm.
These are all percentages for October 2018. is
Correct.
that- And we know that there's going to be a big shift in the district next year with students moving around. Have you been able to look at a few estimates for what the new school numbers are going to look like?
We haven't started that just yet. We are in the process now of pulling all the demographic data from our Decision Insight, which is our demographer, and putting that in and looking at what the percentage is. It will take some time for us to get an accurate picture. I would probably say around January, once we start enrollment, possibly February, we'll have a better picture of what we predict the free and reduced lunch population to be at that site, as well as the unduplicated account. Part of the conversation is, as two trustees know that live within that area, it is quickly changing because of the construction and the building that's taking place. And so, what was once a high Latino community has simply turned over, and so that's gonna factor into it. Our initial projections that came from Decision Insight actually have Vargas not with similar to where Lando's and maybe Mistral will be, with Montaloma and Therakoff and Castro being below them. That's what the initial projections look like. But again, once we get official numbers, we'll be able to predict with a little bit more accuracy.
Thank you. Now's the time for members of the community to comment on this item. And I have two comments. Two people have submitted cards. One is Stephen Nelson and one is Grace Ma. And if anybody else wanted to comment on this, please fill out a card and submit it to Ms. Lilga.
How much time do they have?
3 minutes each.
Is there a counter somewhere? Oh, it isn't like the city where we have the Target to do. Yeah, my name is Stephen Nelson of Target Students. I recently asked both this district and Mountain View Los Altos on how many economically disadvantaged are free lunch and how many are reduced lunch. I was surprised. Free are the vast majority, quite the opposite of what I thought. I thought the reduced would be the higher numbers and the free would be less. So it turns out that the low income numbers of students on these free programs are far bigger than the reduced ones. So I don't think you could quite say it's this issue of we're having a $15 minimum per hourly rate in Mountain View has now raised all those people that were in the reduced lunch program out of the program. It is still by far the very low income that are causing the economically disadvantaged numbers. So hopefully it isn't this issue of people being afraid to apply for these programs. I don't know how you guys can fight that, but I think that's probably more likely the case than the issue of reduced lunches disappearing. I also learned that the State Board of Education actually has a statewide Excel spreadsheet that shows those numbers and the percentages for every school in every district throughout the entire state of California every year that they take these information. So that ratio, I don't know if it applies throughout the state for the weird way those programs are set up. But that's the newest thing of where free and reduced, what it actually means.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Grace Ma?
Good evening, Board President, trustees, superintendent, and staff. I have just some clarifying questions that I wanted to ask. I was wondering, since the 60 percentage points for free and reduced lunch Title I determination is determined by you, I guess, and you mentioned Superintendent mentioned that we're all waving now,
It's like a flock of
Um,
birds out there.
could move to 50% or even lower. Is there some minimum limit that the Title I typically takes? And then my other question was, how much Title I funding is typically granted per student, or is it, even closely granted that way? That's it.
Thank you. Dr. Rudolph, do you care to address those questions raised by Trustee Mott?
So the Title I funds, that limit was set by the board. When the board accepted Title I funds, I think it was 3 years ago. So yes, we can reduce it down. Typically, once you get below 40%, it becomes a targeted program, which means it goes student by student as opposed to comprehensive school program. The amount of money that we give per student, I think Dr. Clark is running the numbers right there. I want to guess, but I know that my guess is going to be a little bit higher because I like to round up. Per student. All right. So $390 per student. It's 2 comprehensive programs that go to Therakoff as well as Castro. Castro and Therakoff received how much this year in Title I funds? Okay, so they 167. And then we actually did receive additional funding for Title I this year, which we are going to use for their summer school program so that they don't have to set aside funds. So for those that don't know, Castro and Therakoff have traditionally run their own summer school program outside of the district's program. You can't use Title I funds to supplant programs, so we can't take Title I funds and pump it into our district program and then remove funding out. So we're going to keep their program completely separate. And then what we will need to do is next year make a determination as to whether or not we want to lower the bar or do we want to look at other alternatives for providing additional fundings to those 2 schools. Is that?
Thank you, trustees, and including Trustee Gutierrez on the phone. Any questions or comments? Well, I have a question. How much administration goes into overseeing the Title I grant program? Like how much district resources does it take to manage that program and do the reporting and all that?
So by law, because of the funding, the amount of funding we have, we are only allowed to set aside 10%, if I'm correct, and that's for parent education. Really, most of the funding that we use for our Title I and our federal programs office comes out of other funds. It doesn't come out of Title I. So we, outside of the McKinney-Vento position, which I think is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 or so, the rest of that office, the secretary, the coordinator, as well as the director are paid from other funds. Kathy, you want to
I
chime
was
in?
also curious about like the amount of labor. Is it, 2 hours a week? Is it, a 0.25 FTE? I mean, what?
I would say that probably on average, Ms. Smith probably
Could you speak
spends-
closer to the mic,
sorry.
Ms. Bauer?
Ms. Smith, who's in charge of our state and federal programs, along with her staff, probably spends about a quarter to a third of her time just monitoring Title I. It's very compliance heavy because it's a federal program.
Thank you.
Is that why we canceled this program like 5 years ago
Yes.
Yes.
and then reinstated it like 3 years ago?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So a good example of this is for the, so last meeting, Ms. Smith brought up additional policies that had to be changed, which is part of the federal program monitoring process. These are policies that we normally wouldn't address in our normal course of action, but because we are taking federal funds, regardless of the size of the policy change or the impact of it, we have to make the adjustments. As a former Title I principal, now you can upload everything, but we used to have what was called the Title I coffin, which is essentially a big black box, and we would put every piece of paper that we used to address the family compact the parent meetings, the agendas, all of that had to be documented for the federal audit. So it is a pretty labor-intensive process. It picks up towards the end of the year more than it does right now. But Ms. Smith and her team right now focus on compliance with the federal program monitoring portion of Title I.
So is it fair to say that there might be some administrative efficiencies where we could provide similar programming for less money if we didn't have to handle all the compliance, or is that not really an apples to apples?
I think the better way of putting it is that if we can find the funds to run this on our own and probably make some additional changes, and which would then free up staff more time to get to do the things that they need to do, which is making sure that, you know, we're actually impacting or reaching our kids, as opposed to interacting with the federal government to fill out X form and upload it, and then wait for, like, for right now, today we had a huddle. In the huddle, Ms. Smith stated that one of her issues is that all of the people who were the reviewers are currently traveling. So we have to wait another week for them to review the items that we uploaded before we can bring them back to the board. And it's that type of administrative tussle that creates the issues.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments, trustees? Trustee
I
Gutierrez?
had a question.
Okay.
We're waiting.
Oh, okay, sure. So I'm trying to figure out, by when do we have to come up with the numbers to designate what schools will be eligible for Title I status for the upcoming school year?
You told us February, right?
So
Last time we asked.
the Con app typically goes out in May, but as we start our budgeting process in February, we'll need to start having some conversations about do we want to continue to accept Title I funds? If we choose to, what is the percentage that we want to put it at? And if we choose not to, does the board have a desire to fund these schools because they're no longer going to receive Title I funds, and what would that look like so that we can budget that in? So all of that will be a part of our budget process from February until June, with the Con app going in May.
Did that answer
Thank
your
you.
question?
That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. So the next item on the agenda is below market housing for teachers. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping an item. Thank you. The strategic plan update. Excuse me, Dr. Rudolph.
Yes. You still got me. All right. So I'm here to talk about the strategic plan update. And sorry, this was, we don't have any task force updates this time, so I apologize. I didn't catch that one. So a year ago, when we met in our board retreat, one of the items that came out, or maybe it was actually a year and a half ago, one of the items that came out of the retreat that we had was it would be nice for us to have a dashboard to monitor progress that we have in our strategic plan. And as you know, the strategic plan is a 5-year plan that we put in place. It is coming to the end of the strategic plan. And so at some point, as we work into the budget process, we'll need to budget in funds to start working on the second iteration, which will be I believe it's 2026. And so in addition to the strategic plan, every year during our retreats, the board outlines goals that it would like for us staff to accomplish too. And these goals are in addition to the outcomes that are in the strategic plan. So the dashboard is an at-a-glance accountability measure to help staff, trustees, and the public monitor our progress to them. We do have these posted on the website for families to see under the strategic plan headline. And it also progresses annual goals by the trustees. And so just so you can understand the dashboard, since everyone has a cell phone, we figured the battery indicator was the easiest way to pick up on this one, except we've added colors to it. So red means remediation, and blue is always the best one because it means we've completed well ahead of schedule. Typically, if you look at our strategic plan, you'll see most items either yellow or green. Some blues exist, and there are a couple reds this year, which I'll talk about. And then on top of that, we use light bulbs for trustee goals. And those follow a similar convention in terms of the color format. So red would be negative and blue would mean positive. And so we review these progress towards these goals monthly. The dashboard cues us in to think about the items that we have. So we have a couple of remediation plans that we have to create. And then we provide updates throughout the year. And then in the event that items are, we create the strategic plan. So let me jump into this. So for goal 1, there are 10 outcomes and 11 action items. Of those action items, we have 4 that are already completed, and we have 7 items that are in progress. Of those, 0 are in need of remediation plans. And some of those, some of these items actually go for multiple years. So one of the board questions that came in the packet this week was, we had one item that was yellow last year and has now dipped into red, and part of that is because the transition or the handoff between staff didn't go as smoothly as possible, and so we are now behind schedule on a process that should have been in place. And while part of this has to get approval through our unions, that still is not an excuse for us not to have it continuing forward. So we need to bring that up. So the first item is in the achievement gap 1. As you can see, there are 8 action items for this year. Of those, 2 are completed. Sorry, I should say in progress are 5. And 1 is in need of remediation plan. This one was sort of a planned one because it deals with providing books to students. And so one of the things we were waiting on was the appointment of the new head librarian in Mountain View. And so that one sort of lagged, but that's actually my plan. So I actually have to go back in and set up a meeting with her and develop a remediation plan for that to go. And then look at possible grants like the Dolly Parton Foundation, which provides books across the board, and look to see if there's anything else. We are on track with SIOP, and as well as the evidence-based early language acquisition program for K through 3. We've actually expanded it to K through 5 over the summer, and that's our new summer school program. In terms of inclusive and supportive cultures, there are 9 items. Of those, 2 are completed, 7 are in progress. Of the 7 that are in progress, there's 1 that is in need of a remediation plan. And human capital, again, there are 12 items here. 3 are completed, 7 are in progress, and 2 are actually needed in need a remediation plan. The one that I mentioned earlier about the handoff actually has to deal with hiring standards for every single position. So they sort of started, and then when we transitioned from Karen Robinson to Carmen Geisels, that one sort of dropped the ball, and then we went into negotiations. And so we just need to pick that one back up. So Ms. Geisels will be looking at which other areas we don't have an accurate description, and making our updated description, and then making sure that we get those approved by the union so we have hiring descriptions. And I want to point out that it's not that we don't have hiring descriptions for staff, and in most cases, these positions have not been updated for quite some time. So it's really about just going through the process and updating roles and responsibilities. Resource stewardship, there are 11. And so we have 2 that are completed and 9 are in progress. We did implement fairly quickly the digital maintenance request system, which is working pretty well. And we do have a complete inventory of all of our resources, books, supplies, furniture, equipment, and technology, specifically items that are over $500. And we do track and monitor all of our electronic devices regardless of the cost. So for instance, the laptops that are issued, we know exactly where they are and who they've been issued to, whether that's staff or whether that is students. And then in terms of our trustee goals this year, these goals, we have 3 of them instead of 5. These goals are different than strategic plan goals. These goals are actually used in evaluations of all staff, including myself. And so every member of the leadership team has this as the first part of their evaluation process. And so those 3 of those are currently in progress. And those have to do with Mistral, the best practice or plan of action for Mistral, science program, increasing the amount of science or STEM activities that we have, and coming up with a clear plan of action. And then the last one actually is our EL goal, which is tracking that data and monitoring over the course of the year, which we had a presentation on earlier. And I believe that we are bringing this information back to principals at our next leadership team meeting. So our next steps, so during our winter retreat, we will review the dashboard. And then, of course, we always use that as the kickoff to our next set of goals. So that way staff has the opportunity to start planning for them. The LCAP as well as our strategic plan are adjusted based off of our progress as well as our goals. So the strategic plan as well as the LCAP are living and breathing documents. Our site plans are exactly the same way. So they are adjusted over the course of time to reflect where we are as a district. We will provide 2 more updates to trustees and the public outside of the winter retreat. One will be in April and the next one will be in June at the end of the year. And then at some point we will need to start planning on strategic plan 2021 to 26. And so some of the questions that we'll need to ask ourselves are, do we want to conduct district and school quality reviews? We did those in 2015 or 2016. So do we want to use those as a basis or some type of audit to see where we are? And do we want to follow a similar process that we use for developing strategic plan 2021, or do we want to use a different process? And so these questions don't have to be answered now, but as we begin to plan for our next strategic plan, we'll need to understand how much funds we allocate for this. Previously, the district quality review as well as the school quality reviews were funded by an outside source. So that $280,000 did not come at the cost of the district. The amount of funds that we used for developing the strategic plan, half of that was donated by the county. So the $30,000 that it cost us to develop the strategic plan, the meetings that we held, I don't think that the county, because it's having some budgetary issues in terms of declining enrollment. I don't know if it's in the same, and it's spent down its reserves pretty frequently, according to the last superintendent. So I don't know if we will be able to go back to the county and ask them for additional funds to help with the strategic plan monitoring program. But that's a conversation that I'll need to have with the county superintendent when the time comes, once we determine what the process is going to be moving forward.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions, trustees? I have, well, it's actually a couple. The 2 areas for remediation, you said there was for inclusive supportive culture, there was one, but we don't know what that is. And then human capital, you explained the job descriptions, but there was a second. I know you're working on the remediation plans, but I'm just wondering which areas those were.
So in the board packet, there was a copy of the dashboard that was included. I would actually need to pull either a sheet of it or actually it looks like. So the items that need remediation: partner with community agencies to ensure every child has access to books in his or her home. That's under goal 2 of the achievement gap. Staff will communicate with stakeholders in a culturally responsive manner. We're still looking for an appropriate training that addresses it. We've seen some, but most of them are classroom focused, and we need one that's a little bit overarching. Creating hiring standards for all and expectations for all positions. Create well-developed induction procedures. We have an induction process, but it's just an induction process. We need something that's a little bit more robust. And
That was it.
those are all the items.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any members of the community wishing to comment on this item? Seeing none. Trustees, any comments? Trustee Wheeler?
Yeah, I would like to comment that many boards that I've been on, so this board, the board before that, and the board before that, we're asking for a dashboard. So I want to say to you that I'm very happy to see finally that we have a dashboard that is understandable, quick to understand visually, exactly the way a dashboard should be. And I think it's good how explicit it is. You know, very easy to understand. And these are the steps, and this is what we're doing going forward. So I want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
I concur. We've already had community comments on this item. Trustees, were there, we already, the time came and went for community comments on this item.
I think Trustee Wheeler got an extra time after her time. So could you,
No.
wasn't it trustee comments and then public comments?
We already had trustee comments, then I opened it up for public comment.
And then trustee
Questions.
comments again? Oh, is
Then
that
we
the
had
way it
community
works?
comments, and then trustee Wheeler was
Okay.
making a board comment. So we've already, the time has come and gone. If you have comments, you are welcome to submit them to us in writing via email. Anybody else have comments on the dashboard and the presentation?
I'd
Yeah,
just like to
I
add.
have some comments.
Okay, let's go.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so when you look at the dashboard, it's interesting to have the statistics in front of us, but the reality is that sometimes without parental participation, those things mean nothing. So what I like to see is more parental involvement with their suggestions as to what programs may or may not work, by then being informed of what the dashboard represents. And I think that if we have that available on the website like we do now, hopefully we'll get more community participation. What I like to also see is, I'm not sure, I haven't been at the dashboard like within the last couple of days, but I'd like to see something also with us guests representing this tool and spreading the word about this tool for a Spanish-speaking community at every single school site, so that they can also look at the dashboard and hold us accountable, and not only the school board, but the school district for the progress that we either make or the progress that we don't make in these different areas of public education. And when you have that, then you have more of a powerful community who's interested in public education, and then you have a stronger team. That's basically it.
Thank you. Fair points.
Oh, I'd just like to comment that I've noticed that during some of the presentations, it's nice that the questions that we've asked prior to the meetings you're bringing them up as we go. I'll just add one of my suggestions was as far as the human capital is concerned. I know that I believe you do a newsletter to the teachers. It would be really nice if it's at all possible to see if we can combine a lot of the different things that are available to teachers, not just professional development, but summer teaching opportunities, like a little blurb on where Landed is at, where we're at with teacher housing. If it's once a year, twice a year, I just think it'd be a really nice touch to kind of show them that there's all of this is in one place. I know it's done in various units, and maybe
It
this is
is,
adding
and-
work, but
Mrs. Geisels actually liked the idea and will be incorporated in some type of fashion.
okay.
But we do send it out. We did a better job this year with teacher professional development by listing year-long PD, but I think a reminder about what those are is definitely important. So she did like the idea. I just wanted to highlight, we do send it out in some type of fashion, but we can do a better job of saying, here are the PD offerings, here's the summer school offerings, here are some things to think about. And so I know she's working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I meant to address that one too.
If you cover it all, then we have no comments or questions. It all happens in the background. So.
have a comment. I'd just like, Dr. Rudolph, I'd just like to give you kudos for driving the whole interest in a new strategic plan. It was a long time in coming, and I think that this sort of structure helps make sure we're focusing on the most important things and not forgetting any of the other really important things along the way. This is a great vehicle for achieving goals like that.
Oh,
So
thank you.
thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So should we take a break now, or should we cover the next two items and take it before the Bullis Charter School discussion? Trustees, do you have an opinion? I think if people need a break.
About halfway through.
Next three items will take probably like 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, so we'll address the two shorter items and then we will take a break. Thank you. So the next item is for review and action. It's the award program management services to Greystone West Company for the deferred maintenance roofing project, the solar project, the portable refresh project, and pre-planning services for the North Bay Shore construction projects.
Good, thank you. So
Dr.
we've
Clark.
added projects to the capital projects program that are outside the current scope of the current, or the outside of the scope of the current contract for Greystone West. So we're bringing this forward tonight and recommend approval for to amend their current contract to provide program management services for these future projects.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions, trustees? Members of the public wishing to comment on this item? It looks like Mr. Nelson would like to speak on this.
Yes, I wanted to express my support again, as I have over the years for Greystone West. They've done a great job for the school bond projects. And in particular, I don't know if most of the new members of the board realize, but in the original survey of the district, Jose, you're making noises that show up here. The roofing projects for both middle schools, which I think involve at least 12 classroom wings, was not done when it was decided by a majority of the board that it wasn't so important. But I think that involves about 40 classrooms. So it's good to hear that the deferred maintenance on the roofing is going to be done, because in 2010, some of those roofs were analyzed as being needing replacement in a while. And composition roofs that are rated for 25 or 35 years don't last for 40 years. You might also look about whether those air conditioning units are going to be replaced, because they also were not done in deference for the millions of dollars that were spent on this, the multi-millions of dollars that were spent on the auditoriums. So we need roofs that don't leak. We need air conditioning that works and isn't 10 years past its maintenance time. And I'm sure that Greystone West can advise you on how best to do that and help manage that.
Thank you. So we need, do I have a motion, or any other comments, trustees? Or if not, may I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Trustees award program management services to Greystone West for the deferred maintenance roofing project, the solar project, the portable refresh project, and the North Bay Shore pre-planning services.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, on a motion made by trustee Wilson, seconded by trustee Wheeler, the motion was passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the next item is board policy number 5116.1, intra-district open enrollment policy.
So I'm gonna fill in, but board policy 5116.1 is actual annual review that we do. There are no changes to this board policy, and so we're just asking that you approve it as it is.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions? Members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Any comments, trustees? And if not, may I have a motion to approve?
I move that the Board of Trustees approve Board Policy number 5116 at first reading and waive second reading, since there is no change to the policy.
Second.
And I think it's 5116.1. not to be
Oh,
nitpicky.
Up top, it says one.
Oh,
They've left-
6.1.
they've
All right,
accidentally
so which
omitted
is
a
it?
number.
My package says 5116.1. Is it? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
With the point one. So revising, do you want to revise?
I shall revise my motion to say that we approve board policy number 5116.1, intra-district open enrollment.
Second.
Thank you.
Point.
All in favor? Aye. Trustee
Aye.
Gutierrez? Thank you. Okay, on a motion made by trustee Wheeler and seconded by trustee Wilson, board policy number 5116.1, intra-district open enrollment policy was approved unanimously. Okay, now the
Mhm.
the next item,
Yep.
do we want to take a break before the?
Yes.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll visit the below market housing for teachers and then the petition for the Bullis School after the break. Depends on the day. How are you? I'm always hopeful that I don't grab picnics the first go around and that they'll have them there after the next day, so it's good. Ellen's cute. She's like, I'm gonna keep them an arm's length away. So I know. Like I said, I took that Halloween candy to work to get rid of it and then ended up diving in. I know, that was me. But I'm leaving town tomorrow morning and it's there and I'm like, yay, where are you going? Michigan. Fun for Singing Andy parent weekend. Yeah. I get to go to the big house. Apparently they have the largest stadium in the country. Oh, cool.
Where?
I'm going to the big house.
Which school is this?
Michigan.
Michigan. The big
Like I
house.
know all about it.
104,000 seats or something.
Something like that, yeah. Playing Penn State.
Oh man, my wife got a master's at Penn State. They have another big stadium. 90 something thousand students or rather seats.
I'm mostly going there to see my little
The house that
but
Joe
there
built.
will be a game involved.
Oh, we got a lot of comments on this one.
Oh yeah. Well, no, this is the bus.
That's what I meant by this one. Yeah, they're in a little cluster. They're in a little.
Well, they haven't made so many. We've got a variety,
Is
including
Grace
some
in
of
it?
our
Oh,
own.
Grace is in it. Grace has comments. What are some of our own? What do you mean?
Rich Tanner, Steve Nelson.
Oh, they're in favor of it?
No, just they're coming
Oh.
out.
ST parents comments in the voice section or in the comment section of the voice lead me to predict he's going to be supportive, or he's going to say I have no reason to be against. That's what I predict they'll say. Oh, by the way, can I get a red one? Got dropped off.
She drove. You could ask you for a ride. You could have him.
I could
I
lift.
would have driven. This is the first time I've driven in 2 weeks. I'm really supposed to wait.
I could have lifted us home.
You can have Greg drive.
That's true. I offered the last time we were in this situation.
Yeah, no.
I did drive the last time we were in this situation.
If
Actually,
you had taken Uber, I would have taken Uber.
I could have lifted us home. I didn't forget my phone this time. That day was lame.
That was a rough day.
That day was lame.
Yeah, no problem.
Have you? Have you?
Yeah, probably better. I'm kind of like all.
Yeah, like if you're like
I'm overly cautious.
turning.
It's kind of weird.
Mhm.
Like I really like balance my, like I've got
Oh.
that center thing and I put my arm around it when I do turns.
You're
just
super
to keep
careful.
everything like,
Yeah,
you're not
that's
supposed
good
to
idea.
Or, or do a lot of it. So you don't re-rupture or
Right.
split it again.
well, the most that probably would hurt.
I can't, I have a picker. So you have an old lady picker everything.
Oh yeah,
It's like an arm. It's
Neat.
ridiculous.
Like
But I have more fun with it.
little
my kids loved my mom's. They would like went and like get each other's butts.
It's crazy, but even like shoes, I catch
that.
myself. So, oh my God, the other morning,
What one?
Lucas got something fall out of the freezer that had glass. He got cut. He's standing there to my left, leaning, crying, and my first gut instinct was to pick the child up. And I'm like, I can't. I'd like tell him stop. Don't
Did
move.
you use the thing?
No, but I'm like, it's all about like. I could so easily.
How long do you think? How long do you think it'll be like that?
Yeah, I tried that already, and I can like with fresh pressure, I could go down on the knees and do stuff. But I had to clean that mess up, and the mess of that. I used to do it in a 5-minute thing, but like they're not. It's keep your back straight. Yeah. And I think you need to. Yeah, behind your toes, not behind. Always put them behind. Yes, if they go over your, that's that.
They wanted you to get your thigh to be parallel.
Oh, I don't know, like a dragon ninja warrior. I'm not sure what you call it. Yeah.
My daughter dressed up as the daughters of Jack Skellington.
Oh, cool.
Okay, they dressed up as these. They had red hair. They had red hair and like weird. I don't remember that part of the movie that well. Was it in the last like 2 minutes of the
Get Ellen. We're starting up again, Jose.
Yeah, you can clear your mind. Yeah. Well, that's like the part of my exercise.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. We used to do that.
Okay, at 8:32, I'm calling the meeting back to order. And the next item on the agenda is below market housing for teachers in conjunction with the County of Santa Clara. Dr. Rudolph.
At the last board meeting, County Supervisor Joe Simitian addressed the board concerning below-market housing project in conjunction with the County of Santa Clara and neighboring school districts. He recommended that we set aside $600,000 for the access to 12 of the units in the project that they are developing, which would possibly bring our total of affordable housing for teachers to 156. What we are looking for is for you to take action that the Board of Trustees directs administration to identify possible sources of funding in the amount of $600,000 to help fund the project and participate as a project partner.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions, trustees? Members of the, oh, I'm sorry.
Dr. Rudolph.
Yes.
this, dollar amount per unit is compares pretty favorably with other projects we're considering. Is that correct?
So his 12 units is actually well below what we're paying for in the Fort Bay project. I think part of that is because he has some outside funding sources that we don't have access to that are helping to supplement the costs. I know the city of Palo Alto plans on making a contribution. There's a housing fund initiative that's going to make a contribution. I think so. That's what's bringing the costs down.
And the county owns the land.
Right.
And the
already.
county,
That's a big one.
the county owns the land, which is
The biggest
really
one.
the biggest reason why. Our project is in line with what we saw the cost per unit. It's actually lower than the cost per unit that we would have if we would have built on Cooper Park. We were estimating that it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $500,000. And so we're doing $385,000 for the Fort Bay project. This one is considerably lower, but again, they have some additional funding sources that we just don't have access to, but we'll try to get entry to.
Well, we have access to this way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this project is still conceptual, and he, at least at a presentation that Trustee Wheeler and I heard him give at the Mountain View High School, he was saying 60 to 120 units, like 60
Right.
was kind of a floor. So it conceivably could be more. I mean, they
Right.
just don't know what approvals they'll get.
Right. And it would take, so whereas the project that we're leading at 777 Middlefield is next year should be entitled, and 18 months after that should be finished. This one could possibly be 3 to 4 years out. So one of the things we'll talk about with his office is, the time frame so that we can appropriate funds accordingly. So if it's 7 years from now and it's $100,000, and we can set aside, we don't have to set aside $600,000 immediately unless we have the funds to do it. And we'll put that in a separate fund so that it sits there and it won't be touched.
And this is just dedicated housing for teachers. They won't have the income
Correct.
thresholds.
Correct.
Any further comments, trustees? Okay. So do we need a motion to?
There weren't community comments?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
For a class or whatever, and I was like, oh, are in yoga or like, yeah, and then there was like 3 places.
Okay.
You're gonna wanna
Were
mute
there any
again
members
there.
of the, I thought
Trustee
I'd already
Gutierrez,
asked if there were any members of the community wishing to comment on this. My apologies for overlooking that. But if there are, okay. So any further discussion, trustees, or do we have a motion to provide direction?
I move that the Board of Trustees direct administration to identify possible sources of funding in the amount of $600,000 to help fund the project and participate as a project partner.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, on a motion made by trustee Caldonato and seconded by trustee Wheeler, the recommended, the direction is given unanimously. Okay. Now we're moving on to the petition from the Bullis Charter School. Dr. Rudolph?
Yep, sorry, I was fixing my water. Today we're asking for you to officially receive the petition for a charter. According to Education Code 47605, there are 2 things that will occur. Today starts the clock for both the public hearing, which needs to occur, as well as the final decision, which has to be granted, which has to be given within 60 days. And I'll talk about that. So we do need the board to take action on this. This is your official, as a receipt of an official body moving forward. And then I will say that after this, once the board has officially received, moving forward, the charter petition can actually be submitted to, if it's a renewal process, that can actually, and where the authorizing agency, that can just be simply sent in. It doesn't need official action by the board. We'll review the next steps in the process, and we'll also discuss the Proposition 39 and its implication. We did receive a Prop 39 request last night, and so there are specific timelines or action items that need to take place with that also. So we received the position, and now we have a couple action steps. So the first one is that we have to hold a public hearing. Our public hearing is set for December 6th. We are using our regularly scheduled board meeting to have the public hearing. And then after that, we will need to grant or deny the charter within 60 days. We have sent a second official request to representatives of Bullis Charter School, requesting an extension to January 10th, which is a regularly scheduled board meeting. Part of the rationale is that the new state law requires that we swear in our new, possibly new board members on December 14th, which is after the hearing. So essentially, it's possible if since we have December 20th as the possible date that we'll have it, it's possible that we'll be swearing in individuals and then asking them to make a decision right there. And considering that we have holidays coming up, a simple extension of 10 days is what we're seeking. I have yet to receive, I haven't checked my email since I've been in here, so I've yet to receive initial approval of that, and it does have to be approved by them. So we're going to go ahead and assume that December 20th will be the day that we will have to hold the final recommendation. And so before we go into that process, let me talk about the Prop 39. So Proposition 39 is a state law passed in 2000, which requires school districts to make facilities towards kids who reside within the district, including classrooms and non-classroom spaces. And so the Proposition 39 request must be made by November 1st, and there's a specific timeline in which we must adhere. And this process runs parallel to the petition process that was recently submitted. A charter school can submit or is required to submit a Prop 39 every single year. So what we will see, depending on what comes next with the charter, regardless of whoever the authorizer is, as they increase their numbers in students, they will submit another Proposition 39, which will trigger us to add particular rooms. The first step of this, because it's our first time, the charter school must demonstrate that at least 80 students who live within the district boundary plan on attending. They did provide us with their intent forms last night. So we have started to put those into a database, and then we'll be using our demographer to plot those students, and I'll talk about why in a second. So there is a penalty, though, if they come in under their projected number by 25 students or 10%. And so that penalty that is assessed will be $2,000 per student. Ballpark, our per student cost is somewhere in the neighborhood of $9,000. So it gives you a figure. Most charter schools, if they are under that number, are willing to forego the hit. I do not believe that after we go through the verification process, that Bullis will be impacted by this or that we'll be charging a penalty, but it's important to put that out there that in the event the parents decide not to attend and it exceeds that number, that we do assess a penalty and that money comes back. And we may make efforts to verify the residency. Yes, sir.
So the 25 below or 10% below, is that like a general rule?
Yes.
And so is it whichever one's lower or whichever number is bigger?
Right. So in this case, the 25, so it's 25, the 25 would be the number. So 10% would be 8 out of, I think they have 168. So it would be 16.8. If they go under 25, we would be able to assess the penalty.
Okay.
And so we do have to verify. In terms of, in order to do this process properly, we are going to have to do a couple of things. Just as we do with choice school, if a parent registers with Bullis, we cannot hold space in their zone, neighborhood school, or choice school. This is very important because the funding stream that we have to pay Bullis will kick in. And so we need to make sure, and the facilities, right? So we can't assume that we're going to have space at a particular school and then at the same time assume that that student is going to be housed at the other school. So we have to assume, just like with our choice programs, and we do have this as part of the registration process for our choice programs, that if you accept or if you are engaged, if you choose this choice program, you're going to forego your neighborhood school placement. So that will be put into place. Students who are not admitted in Bullis will be placed at a school site where available space. This may or may not be the neighborhood school, and I think that's a very important point to bring up. Part of this is about the overloads that we have across the district. For instance, I'll use Montaloma as a good case. Montaloma this year in 3rd grade is at capacity and we can't go over. We need to actually add an additional teacher if another student comes in. So we consider Montaloma 3rd grade closed because we just don't have the additional capacity to handle that. And so we will monitor any student who doesn't make it into Bullis on a case-by-case basis and place them either at their neighborhood school or we will place them at another school that is under-enrolled, and most likely will end up being one of the schools that's under-enrolled just because of space. Yes?
It's easier to just ask now instead of waiting until the end.
Sure.
So what's the timing? How would we even know if a parent registered their child at Bullis and at their neighborhood school?
So the intent form is actually the document that we have to use. So our registration process, I'm not sure what the timeline is of Bullis's registration process, but ours doesn't start until January. So we have to remove students from there and start and as we're doing our enrollment process, we have to assume that those students aren't going to be there because that's what the Prop 39 requests. So
Are you talking about the signature pages that were in the petition?
no, so yesterday we received another document that has the actual intent. I intend to enroll my student. There were 131 pages that were added, totaling 144 students, I think it was.
Okay.
So we've entered those into a database today that's been sent off to our demographer so that we can plot it. And again, I'll talk about that. Actually, it's coming up, right? So in a second. But essentially what we have to do is, as part of our plan for facilities, we need to look at where all of the students are coming from and decide on what location is actually the best based off of where the students are coming from. That doesn't mean that that's the determining factor. So just because every student comes from the Sylvan neighborhood doesn't mean that we have to place a site over in Sylvan neighborhood or choose Huff as the example. But it does mean that we have to take that into consideration as we're planning where we have available space for Prop 39.
But that wasn't Bullis Mountain View's enrollment process, right?
No, no. So
they could get another 500 people to apply that wouldn't have to tell us they applied, correct?
so I'm not certain on how their enrollment process works.
Okay, I'm just saying, like, besides the people on that list, like, when it comes time to apply,
Right.
those parents wouldn't be telling us
Right.
anymore.
The important thing for us is that if existing students and we do have some who are planning on going to Bullis,
Mhm.
we need to remove them off, not unenroll them, but we need to remove them from our counts because we have to assume that they're going to go to Bullis in order to fill the Prop 39. And then Bullis again has submitted the document in terms of how many spaces, kids that they're
I think I
planning on.
understand. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it is possible that, and we only, the purpose of Prop 39 is for us to house students that reside within our district. The current Bullis school actually has students who are out of district. And so Prop 39 does not cover those students. So if a student is from Los Altos, Palo Alto, Santa Clara, Sunnyvale,
Mountain View, but not inside our district.
correct,
Yeah.
then those students are not accounted for in Prop 39. It is
Gotcha.
only, the assumption is for Prop 39 that the students that we typically were housed within our district are coming out of our site, and therefore we must provide an adequate facility to the charter school.
What happens to the other kids?
The charter school has to squeeze them in.
Okay.
So we do have to start with the belief that we will house the charter school at a single site. If no site is acceptable, then we can split them up, and the final placement is determined by the district. And I'll go through what that process. Are we missing a slide? Is it backwards? Oh, okay. So I'll go back and then forward. So we now have the application with a site location. We will then need to verify and double check the numbers to make sure that they meet the 80. We will then submit a response to their projections. At that point, they will respond to our objections and possible modifications. From there, in February, we'll make a preliminary offer for space. No rule says that we have to use the charter school's projections. Sorry, since this is backwards, I forgot. March 1st, they will respond to our preliminary offer. And then in April, we will provide a final offer from the district for Prop 39. And then by May 1st, they have to respond to the final offer. If they reject it, then we do not have to house the charter school. So that's an important thing. And the standard for facilities is that it has to be reasonably equivalent. And then so there's yes.
You could finish your sentence.
Go
And
ahead.
then- is there any precedent for that? District offers facilities and the charter school rejects it, and then they have no facilities, like in this county?
Oftentimes what happens is that they will accept and then they will sue. And
Oh.
I'm not talking about bullets. I'm talking about in general. Like this is where most litigation
Because
happens.
then they at least have what was offered.
Correct.
But
But
then they say
but
it's
the argument of
not good enough.
reasonably equivalent becomes the basis of the lawsuit.
Okay.
So we have to take that into consideration. All right. So I mentioned this earlier, the public hearing. We're going to hold it on December 6th. It is expected that Bullis Charter School representatives will present their petition to the board. Board members are allowed to ask questions. We do, however, recommend that you stay away from providing your opinion on what your decision will be in the following weeks. The public, including labor unions, are allowed to provide comments. And the most important thing is that no formal decision will be made at that meeting. It's just a public hearing. The final decision, the board will agendize an action item to approve or deny the petition. Again, at least as of earlier today, about 4 o'clock, I did not receive agreement for the extension. So we're going to go to bullet 2, which is we are going to call a special meeting on December 20th, which is a Thursday, to house for the board to make a final decision. We will, at the December 20th meeting, provide a summary of findings and provide the board with a recommendation for action. We can do 3 things. We can provide, one of the recommendations can be to approve the charter. One of the recommendations can be to approve the charter conditionally with the request for certain amendments to the charter. And then one of the other actions could be a denial. If we deny, then the charter school will then go to the county and follow a similar process. If the county denies, then they will go to the state and follow a similar process. And then at this time, although this is the board can choose to change this item, the public will be able to comment during this normal 10-minute period per item, but you are more than welcome to extend that. That's it.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions, trustees, that weren't already asked? Okay. I believe I have 6 cards from members of the public wishing to comment on this item. Count them again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. Was there anybody that wanted to comment on this item that did not already submit a card to Ms. Lilga? Okay, normally we limit the comments to 10 minutes. We've got 6 speakers that wish to speak. Trustees, how would you like to handle this?
I would say we have an option that's printed in our welcome packet that we can
Extend the time.
extend the time. We can double the time from 10 minutes to 20 minutes. So if we extended it to 20 minutes and we gave each person 3 minutes, that would be 18 minutes. And this assumes that people don't try to keep coming up because the time is based on 3 minutes at 20 minutes total. So I'm happy to to do 20 minutes of 3 minutes each, and assume that people aren't going to try to then come up and extend it for more than 20 minutes.
Does that work for the rest of you? And does that work for you, Trustee Gutierrez?
That's fine.
Okay.
Sure.
Is that all right, Jose? Everybody else is concurring. I will assume your silence is assent. So I've got 6 speakers here. I'm going to read the order. I would ask that you line up. And
Yeah, sure. There's no lag right now, so bear with me.
thank you.
Are you yodeling? What was that?
I'm going to ask that everybody line up. And when you take the microphone, please introduce yourself. So the order is going to be Heather Scholl, Janine Ramirez, Grace Ma, Araz Yurdasser, I hope I'm not butchering your name too much, Rich Tanner, and Stephen Nelson. And you can adjust the mic so that it's not. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather Scholl, the mother of 2 girls, ages 4 and 5.5. And practically speaking, I'm very excited about the Bullis School purely because it's offering a full day program for my TK child as well as my incoming first grader, something that I cannot get at our current public schools. Intellectually, I'm very excited about this program because of the innovative teaching methods, including project-based learning and opportunities for kids based on their unique learning styles. My two girls are very different from each other, and I think I value an environment that is flexible enough to accommodate their interests, motivations, and learning styles. And socially, as a public school kid myself, I find it very important that the diversity of my children's education is reflective of the community that we live in. And thinking beyond my family, giving the opportunity for a progressive form of learning to all kids from all backgrounds in our community can only have a positive effect. I think there could be some kids who get lost in the shuffle in the standard public school, but when they have the opportunity to participate in a school that's more open to their styles of learning, then I think they can thrive and make a difference in the world to come. When I asked my daughter why she wanted to go to the Bullis School, she said, "I want to be one of the first kids so I can set a good example and learn to be a good leader."
Thank you. Janine Ramirez.
Hello, good evening, President Blakely, Trustee, Superintendent. My name is Janine Ramirez, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the California Charter Schools Association. We have received multiple questions from Mountain View families asking for clarification regarding some of the statements that have been made here in district meetings regarding the charter petition before you and also enrollment in the Mountain View Wisman School District. These statements are really leading to a lot of confusion with some of our families, some of them feeling that they're being targeted or bullied. We really hope that we can come to a conclusion and that we can help defy some of those miscommunications. As you know, this is a Mountain View District is an LEA, a local education agency, and they have the obligation to provide a seat for all district families. In a recent meeting that just took place last week, some of the families heard in that meeting that if they, very similar to what is shared here, that if they sign a petition for Bullis, that they would be losing their seat in their neighboring school when that is not abiding by the law. And so I think that I don't know if that's a targeted attempt to dissuade families from signing the petition or if it's just in an attempt to instill fear. But I really think that we need to put our families and our students first. And so having a couple conversations just to clarify what is the law, what can be done, what are the things that we can be telling our families and the things that we shouldn't be telling our families, I think would be helpful to all of the families of our district that are trying to go through this process. As trustees elected by the community, I think that we have an obligation to support the families and to make sure that we are in compliance with the law. And so tonight I come before you to urge you on a few requests. One, to hire an independent expert organization to fairly assess the merits, the legal compliance of the charter petition. I know that it is always recommended for districts to hire legal counsel, and the present legal counsel is renowned for denying petitions. So I think that if we hire someone who has unbiased, then all parties can get accurate information. Secondly, please direct staff to create a neutral fact sheet for families that provides key information for families on the issues of enrollment in the district. Again, I think that sharing information to scare the families isn't the attempt. I don't think that that is our intention. And so just making sure that we're all on the same page and making sure that all of the information that is being shared with families is being done so in a professional and not in a scare tactic way. 3, review recent public statements that have been shared by district staff at district-sponsored meetings. And as I mentioned, some of those parents are feeling very scared, and some of those parents have the education, the ability to write a letter, as one of the letters was sent before you, I think a couple days ago, expressing their concerns. But some of the parents don't have the education or have the ability to share their concerns, and so they're
Thank you.
not coming out of fear. So, and
Thank you.
finally, the public records.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate them. Grace Ma.
Hello again. My name is Grace Ma. I'm on the Santa Clara County School Board, but tonight I am not representing my board. I'm speaking for myself, and I'm also not going to talk about my personal opinion of the Bullis Mountain View petition, but I would like to talk to you and share my experience with regards to evaluating petitions, since I've viewed a few more of them than maybe you guys have. There's three things that I find really important and high priority considerations. One is the founding team. I like to make sure that there's experience in the organization to be able to run the school, to be able to have a track record of running schools, to just really have the experience to know how and what to do when starting a new school, basically from scratch. The second thing I look at, which is really important, is the curriculum and the innovation that the school is presumably contributing, because that's usually something that is distinctive from the local school district. And also to remind all of you that there is a preference when deciding on charter schools for schools that target the low SES or disadvantaged students. So if the program has some innovation and some a solid curriculum, I find that very important in evaluating charter schools. And then the third thing, from even a business standpoint, is the budget, and to make sure that their budget with projections makes sense. Since it's all a projection, they haven't actually enrolled any students. The importance of having a solid feel for the projections and making sure that the budget covers all of the costs is very important. Also a note that legally, there is no you are not allowed to decide on a charter petition based on the fiscal impact to the district. And so I know that there's a lot of fiscal impact sometimes on districts, but that is specifically stated in Ed Code as not a reason to deny a charter. Then the other thing I wanted to bring out was kind of these rainbow sheets that I've left for each of you. These are the 5x5 matrix on academic performance, and I've done them up in kind of pairs of English results and math results, English language arts, and then math. So the first two are, and these are all from the CDE website, and you can go to the CDE website and look for 5x5 matrix. And so the first 2 pages are the Mountain View Wisman as a school district, where the different schools in the district are doing with respect to English language learners. And the grids basically are color coded such that blue is good, green is not as good, yellow is kind of in the middle, red is bad, orange is not so good. So please take a look at all of these charts for the different schools in North Mountain View. And on the last page, I do also have the data for Santa Rita,
Thank
which
you.
is Los Altos Schools.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments.
Hi. Hi, my name is Uraz Yurtasha, and I'm here to show my support for the Bullis Charter School. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so my husband and I, we moved to Mountain View about 5 years ago to start a family. And now we have 3 boys. One of them is going to start in kindergarten next year, 2019. And we've been doing our research about schools, as you could see. And one of the schools that we're very, very excited was the Bullis Charter School. When we heard about them possibly opening in Mountain View, we really we really were hopeful. And I would like to tell you why we are excited. So one of the reasons that we picked Mountain View is the diversity. When I mention diversity, I'm not just talking about ethnically, but also socioeconomically. And this school really is planned to serve those students because we want our kids to be exposed to that. And the second reason is why we picked Mountain View is just right in the middle of Silicon Valley. And we really believe in an education that it needs to be innovative, cutting edge. And I think the school is meeting that criteria, such as, they have project-based learning, workshops. So yeah, we really, really hope that you could hopefully approve. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rich Tanner, and I have a surprise for people who know me. I have not got a single opinion whatsoever about whether Bullis charter would be good for Mountain View or not. And I've tried. I've done a lot of research. I've talked to former and present Bullis parents. I've read whatever I can get my hands on, and I can't come up with an opinion about it. But what I have learned very much is that Los Altos School District messed up bad by being antagonistic towards Bullis. Everybody lost something. This was a bad situation, and our district has had a history of pitting groups, families against each other to bad ends. And I really want to stress that whether they get here or not, whether they're the best thing since sliced toast or they're going to bring on the zombie apocalypse, what is worse is if we fight with them. If we make an antagonistic relationship with Bullis, it's not going to help anybody. So I'm just urging you to try not to play games or be, trying to find a way to trip them up deliberately. They're very determined. They know exactly what they're doing to get chartered. And so that's basically my advice, is to play nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stephen Nelson, and I just decided to second what the previous person just said. I remember going to one of the high school openings for their new buildings over at Mountain View High School. And at that time, I was talking to the architect, and I happened to talk to the chief financial officer of Los Altos School District. And he was complaining that he was spending half of his time on the issues of funding legal fights against Bullis and what their Prop 39 responsibilities would be. And I don't want to put Dr. Clark into that position. So I hope you can, this is a public school. It's set up by the laws of the state of California. It's using a team that looks like it has experience. I haven't read all 165 pages, but I have read some. And there's one thing I would like to connect with Grace Ma's comments. On page 128, they're starting to talk about the enrollment priorities. And I really think they need to switch priority number 1 and priority number 4. Priority number 4 is a socioeconomic disadvantage priority. You can't put that as number 4 if that's your first priority. We know in this district, and our superintendent is nodding, the video will show at least one of the newer trustees is nodding, that if you put the number 1 priority as grandfathering current siblings, you enable inequities to start happening and to persist for up to 15 years. You can't put that as your number 1 priority and still come and say, socioeconomic disadvantage is the same percentage as this district is our highest priority. If you do that, you're being dishonest to this community. You're being dishonest to the socially, economically disadvantaged part of this community. And I think you need to change that part of your proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rudolph? Oh, I thought you wanted to say something. Trustees, any comments on this or questions? Further questions?
I had a question. Dr. Rudolph, maybe it was 2 years ago, when there were more students applying to kindergarten at Huff and Bub than Fit, we went and added portables and did whatever so that the people could go to their neighborhood school. Do we have any reason, should people have any reason to think that we wouldn't do that for any neighborhood school that had more kids than Fit until we, had a chance to change the boundaries so that they fit in the schools the proper way again? Like, there's something like 115 kids in kinder or first at, one or both of those schools. It doesn't seem realistic to me to the possibility that somebody wouldn't be able to get into Castro or Derkoff because they're on, in that list. It just doesn't seem very realistic. I think we'd let them in their neighborhood school if they wanted to go.
So we haven't allocated funds to pay for that after next year. So our capital bonds program, when we issued all of our funds to pay for the portables that are currently for overflow at each one of those sites, that comes out of our Measure G funds. So that's a separate funding stream. After next year, it will hit the general budget, and we will need to pay the cost out of there, which is one of the things I brought up. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about $300,000 for the total cost of all the portables that we have. And so it was never our plan to keep these portables at these sites. It was always our plan to start removing them off of the sites as soon as far. In fact, if you look at our construction schedule, you'll see starting next year, sometime around, I want to say it's maybe November or something like that, we're supposed to start removing excess portables, and they've been designed to peel them off as the population decreases, with the goal that at the end of the 2019-20 school year, that because we no longer have Measure G funds that we can spend, that all of those portables will be removed and our boundaries are normalized. So,
Oh, that's great. I was referring more to the idea that I think the example you used was, well, if the classrooms in Mauna Loma, if the classes are full and they, 25 students per class or something, they have 2 classes, and then another student who doesn't get into Bullis says, I live in the Mauna Loma neighborhood, I want to go to that school. And all we would have to do is add a teacher so that all the neighborhood kids in that grade could attend their neighborhood school. Is there any reason to think that we wouldn't take that step versus sending them to some other school?
we've never planned for that.
Oh,
So,
I know, but we just deal with what happens when it happens, right?
I think the question will be to the board is whether or not you want to pay for the portable and an additional teacher. And you would need to allocate the funds. And the issue that we have with this, because we have an initial plan to remove all those items, is that those decisions will be made on the fly based off of enrollment. And then, as you saw earlier, our enrollment tends to drop, and then it spikes, and then it drops, and then it spikes, and then it drops. It's very hard to predict. So the easiest way for us to do is once we decide on where, based off of the Prop 39, where Bullis will be housed, assuming that the charter is approved at one of the 3 levels, then we will have to figure out how to place all of our students, with the priority being to our students who are registered with us first, and then go from there, depending on what their lottery process is. And I don't know the timeline for there. And we have to remember that part of the decision that we've made intentionally is that we would reduce the number of classrooms at all of our sites so they fit this around 450 students. And so while some schools, I think Huff is a good example, can house something like 625, that 625 is predicated on the idea that we have the extra, is it 7 portables that exist there? Huff has 5. We will pull those off. Then 2 of the new classrooms will become special ed rooms that were dedicated as one of the decisions that we made before that. And so all of that sort of reduces its excess capacity that it has. And so if we would have known this 2 years ago, then we probably would have developed a different plan of action. So while, yes, technically anything is possible to drop a portable down, we would need, after next year, once we start removing portables, we actually need to know that, is it a 6-month lead time for adding a portable? Right. So we can't make that decision on a fly. So if we were to add so in your example, if we were to add a classroom to Huff, we need to have enough lead time to get it through DSA to add that portable there and then add the teacher. And that's a planning issue. It's not as if we can just go around and just shuffle and just drop something there. It's just too much lead time.
Okay,
that
thanks.
takes.
Any other questions, trustees? Do I have a Jose? Did you have any questions?
Not really questions, but more like a comment, if I may.
Dr. Rudolph, you
You've been
recommended
a
that.
part of our district in general for a number of years with PK support and funding. You know very well that we reach out to our Latino-speaking community every day at every single school site with our staff, our teachers, our parents, and our administrative staff, along with our trustees. Let's get that straight. Number two, I'm sick and tired of having people accuse our superintendent of speaking in a way where they feel threatened. No. Our superintendent speaks on behalf of our district and always shows respect to members of our community, whether they speak English or Espanol. That's a given fact. That parents may feel a little bit intimidated about the process in general of what Bullis represents in Mountain View as a school district is something else. But to come here and tell us that our superintendent is not doing a good job in communicating this message to everyone evenly and openly, don't come here and insult us or me or him. Period. If you wish to have a discussion, we can agree to disagree on many issues. But we're still a governing body, and we are responsible for our district, and I am proud of our superintendent. I appreciate your suggestions, and thank you for your time.
I think we all appreciate your time. And what you're
Thank you.
saying in response to Greg's questions was if we had known a year and a half ago, per the recommendation of the Charter Schools Association, it would have been a little bit easier to plan and accommodate. So it would be helpful to have more time.
Right.
To, yeah. So, okay, thank you.
I think one more important thing to point out is the thing with, another thing to point out is I recall going to, it must have been in 2014 or 2015 to the Stevenson Pact Information Night for my incoming kindergartner. And because we were zoned for Huff, we were informed that if we opted to get on that wait list, we could lose our spot at our neighborhood school. And I believe that was a policy that was in place before you even arrived.
This is correct.
So I just wanted to clarify that for the community. This isn't something new. This isn't like a threat tactic, but it did inform what I ended up deciding for my own child. And it was clearly stated. So this isn't something new. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
We're treating Bullis as a choice school.
Yes.
And so just like Stevenson and just like Mistral, the same thing will go for Bullis in terms of what happens with enrollment.
Except
Thank you.
both Mistral and Stevenson are schools that for which the applications would come directly to our district. Aside from the people in the list you got last night, no other people that apply to Bullis are also have any obligation to tell us they did. Correct?
Correct. But just like
Nor does Bullis have the obligation to tell us.
But their Prop 39 request is based off of the students that they plan on enrolling in their district. And so in order for us to determine space, in order to meet the 80, we have to count them, those students, and we have to assume that they're going to attend because that's a part of the Prop 39 process.
I understand.
Thank you. I mean, I think this conversation just goes to highlight that we need to meet each other in the middle. We need to play straight with each other. And having one side have all the statutory and legal cards makes it possible that that doesn't happen. But I think for a productive coexistence, we really need to work together.
Speaking of that, on this topic of working together, is there any good reason we don't have the hearing on our next regularly scheduled regular meeting and then the approval or denial at the subsequent regularly scheduled meeting?
So there is a 400-page document that staff has to review and provide our thoughts and recommendations on. Considering the time frame, I just don't think that it's feasible for us to get that done that quickly.
That's the document we've had for 2 weeks?
That's the document we have started, yes.
We also have work of this district to do. We need to complete the review of the site plans for our schools. That's important to do. I mean, we were hoping to do it earlier, even in the year,
True.
so that
I always push for that to be as early as possible.
right.
Right.
So,
It's
and
just
the
not
only
enough
reason we're
capacity.
not doing it today is that a number of the principals are at a conference.
Mhm.
Or we
That
would have
deals
done
with,
that today.
in fact, I've received a number of emails and texts from them that talks about how do you deal with poverty in school. So they
good.
find it really informative. And I'm sure that you can ask them some questions about it. One important thing, you will need to take action to officially receive the charter petition so that the clock starts.
Thank
And
you.
you do this as a governing board.
So do we have a motion to accept or to receive, I think is the right verb, the petition?
I move that we receive the petition from Bullis Charter School. More language I missed.
That's it.
Everyone's looking at me.
No, we need a second. Would anybody like to second Ms. Wilson's motion?
Second.
I'd like to make a comment. I'm gonna abstain from this vote because I think we received this document when it was posted on our website on October something 18th. So saying we received it now is kind of weird. We've had it for weeks, so I don't
The
think I
board has to
can-
officially receive it. It's a difference because it's
As
the
a
first
board.
time. As a board, you have to receive it. After this, staff can receive it on its own. And that
And-
is
and
directly
we
from our
rec-
legal counsel.
Does the board have to receive it, or does the
Yes.
district have to receive it?
No, from our legal counsel, the board has to receive it.
And had it been dropped off a day earlier, we would have been
Correct.
able to modify the agenda
True,
for
would've been-
72 hours, but we only got it 48 hours prior to the meeting. So that is why today was the first day. This was on advice of legal counsel. We're not trying to play games.
This
We got to
seems
follow the
Kind of
rules.
like a game. Like it seems to me that we received this the day I saw it on our district website. So I don't know what definition of received we're using, but we received this a long time ago.
The reason,
So
the reason
saying
why
that we received it tonight is kind of a weird.
But it has to
maybe
be an
not-
agendized meeting.
No, I'm not so sure about that. So I don't think I'm going to.
our
vote
legal
for this
advisor
motion.
said that, and the reason why it was posted on the website is we actually received the public records request immediately after its receipt, almost minutes after. So that was part of our response to the public.
Thank you.
Fine.
Okay, so we have a motion that was seconded. All in favor? Aye. Trustee Gutierrez?
Yeah, before I vote, I just basically want to reiterate, not only to the community that speaks Spanish or English, or who are planning to attend Bullis or a Mountain View Municipal School District school, and remind Greg, Trustee Coldonado, that we don't play games. We have a difference of opinion on many issues, but one thing we don't defer on is legal advice from our counsel. So in this case, when we have a board policy that says we receive something and then afterwards we deliberate and then we vote, we honor that process. No matter who it is, no matter what time, we always honor it. So I don't want any grandstanding here about taking the higher ground because that's just a farce. The district's not in that business, and neither is Superintendent Rudolph. So in that case, I just say, yes, we accept this petition, and that's my vote.
Thank you. So on a motion made by Trustee Wilson and seconded by Trustee Wheeler, 4 voted in favor, which were Trustee Wheeler, Trustee Wilson, Trustee Gutierrez, and myself, Trustee Blakely, and Trustee Coldonado abstained. So the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, so the next item is items for future agendas. We have already, board updates. I'm sorry. Please stand. I think most of us submitted our board updates to Kathy Lilga already.
Yeah, I would like to say, I know we don't like to spend a lot of time during board meetings. I went to an exceptional program earlier in the week put on by Franklin McKinley School District and Educare on strategies for parent involvement and parent engagement. And I put it in my update, but what I'm going to do is write up some notes from that meeting because I thought it was so excellent. And I know that, we are constantly working on this issue. So I will commit to writing up some notes and sending them to you all.
Thank you.
I'll send mine in to Kathy, and I don't know if anybody cares, but the reason I'm standing is I had back surgery 2 weeks ago, so it's a little challenging for me to sit at extended periods of time. So it's not in deference to anything, but a little bit of pain.
It's good that you're here.
We're glad you're here.
Just FYI.
Okay. Items for future agendas, we already discussed that a bit. And then future board meeting dates, I think we need to modify what's in the agenda to add a December 20th date unless the Bullis Mountain View team ends up granting the request for an extension to January 10th. So do we need a motion to add that date? No, just, okay. All right.
But I would like a clear calendar of what our board meetings are, what the dates of the board meetings are, and what they're going to be regarding regular business and Belos Mountain View business. Because I've written down a bunch of dates here and then scratched them out. It's not totally clear what's going to happen when.
Well, I'd initially asked to save December 13th,
Yeah.
but then it turns out because the state law was modified this year, we can't swear in any new trustees should any of the challengers be elected until after December 14th. And so that was the day after our meeting. And so it's a statutory date. And so I apologize for the confusion there, but we do need to comply with the law.
But then I also have that we've got a meeting on the 6th. It's a public hearing. Is that correct? Okay. And that's
our
wi-
regularly scheduled meeting.
Right.
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 But
And
that
then-
would be with the current board.
Correct.
Yes.
And then the 14th, if the 14th is a Friday, I mean, the board is more than welcome to schedule a meeting on a Friday. But the next Thursday would have been
Well, why
Right.
couldn't we just have it on the 13th?
We thought it made sense to have whoever the new board is
Why?
approve it.
Why?
we swear in on the 14th.
But what difference does that make?
What?
Why not just have this on the 13th when we said we were going to have it?
Well, they're elected
Said,
near the.
yeah, it said
We have
that
to swear
the
them in,
new,
so the earliest we could do it is the 14th.
We could swear them in at the next meeting after that. I don't understand why swearing in new board members has anything to do with when we schedule the Bullis approval. How are they connected? Why are they connected?
I think that the board that approves the charter, assuming that the board approves the charter, should be the board that is going to work with the charter for the next 4 years. So it
It's
may
your
well,
decision, or this is your idea?
I'd consulted with Dr. Rudolph and he consulted with council.
What's council got to do with it?
Then I think you can make a motion to add the date, and then following the process, y'all can vote.
I just
The-
don't.
The hearing will take some time, correct? So we would have a very long marathon meeting on the 13th if we did it that way.
14th, you have to do it on.
14th.
No, yeah.
14th. Wait, the 14th is the
I think-
Friday.
You only have to do it on the
I'm
14th if you
confused.
need to swear in new members in the same meeting, which you don't.
You're
Why are we
suggesting.
making it harder on ourselves? I understand. Meetings on December 20th. We could just do these things on November 15th and December 6th or December 13th.
Well, it's all accelerated, isn't it? We have actually until January 1 that the school's out of session, isn't that correct?
You guys can have it on New Year's, Day or
But
something, sure.
Then it's like, you're losing a whole month.
We have other work that we need to get done. I mean, the other option would be to schedule a special meeting at a different point in time.
Mhm.
But we have the holiday, the Thanksgiving break, the CSBA conference. So I think that the 20th is the most logical date.
or later. And I agree with Board President Blakely, Superintendent Rudolph, and sounds like maybe legal counsel. I think that the discussion and actions for this very important item should be made with and by the board that was elected on November 6th. I don't think, you and I might get reelected, we might not. I don't think we should be making decisions for the district before that election.
You may remember that 4 years ago and 6 years ago, the outgoing boards approved bonds and created new schools in their last meetings of their terms. So this is like a new way of looking at history that we would never want to bind the future to our decisions. And I just wonder if it's playing straight, but
So, and
we'll never know.
my recollection of what you're describing is different than yours, Trustee Caladonato.
Mhm.
I will just say, I think the dates that we're talking about, a new legal date of swearing in on December 14th, determines a lot of what we will do going forward. So, and I don't think trying to rush these things instead of having them be thoughtful meetings with new board members who will be living with this for the next, 4 to 8, 12 years is the best course of action.
Or 16.
Or 16, that's
Or
correct.
16. We also just have we had full agendas before we ever dreamed that Bullis Mountain View might come into existence. And so we can't just put aside the work of this district to, dedicate the entire meetings to the Bullis Mountain View initiative. So,
It is a statutory requirement that we push things aside to get this done in a
well, I
compressed
wouldn't say
time.
push things aside because we still have to, just like with the strategic plan, we can have priority goals. We have to do it all.
True.
But we need to, I concur with what Trustee Wheeler just said, that we need to do it thoughtfully and appropriately and not just rubber stamp things and shove them through.
Oh, did someone suggest that?
I think if we try to consolidate the work of 3 long board meetings into 2, that's what would happen.
Oh, okay.
That's my view.
All right.
Okay. At 9:31, the meeting is adjourned.
I hope you're not on the YouTube with that comment.